Hello, my name is Jasmine Rodriguez, and this is my special education law presentation for SpEd 300 at Grand Canyon University. We're going to start off with the time and the history of special education from the before 1970s, 1970s to present, and then get into a few parental rights cases involved throughout those time periods. So let's start out with before the 1970s. So historically, leading up to the 70s, around the mid 60s, disabilities were viewed as an abnormality, and people with disabilities were viewed honestly as freaks of nature, and individuals who had disabilities were isolated and excluded from groups, and this even meant being excluded from the same education as general ed kids. So they would either be put into private schools or not given the same equal education as everyone else due to their disabilities, their differences, and whatever other struggles that they may have had. And then in the 1965, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act was presented in the United States, and that was just emphasizing high standards and accountabilities throughout all schools in the country. And there's something mandated in the act, which funds are provided to schools through federal government money, and this is given to them so that they can have professional developments, the correct instructional materials, and support educational programs for all students, including those in special education. However, at the time, since special ed students were being excluded from the classroom, this was kind of like a double-edged sword and a rough topic to talk about. But moving forward a little bit, Brown versus Board of Education case forever changed the treatment of all students, including those with special needs, because this law made it, this court case made it so that every student, special ed or general ed, would get the same equal education that they deserve. And moving forward into the 1970s and present day, the Section 504 Act of 1973 was the first disabilities civil rights law to be enacted in the United States, and this basically prohibits the discrimination against people with disabilities and gives them the right to receive federal assistance and set the stage for the Americans with Disabilities Act. And then we move into FERPA. So working in a school system, you hear a lot about FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and this was set in 1974. This is a federal law, and this federal law allows access to educational information and records through public entities, but it protects those privacies and that information of all students in the United States. And so basically FERPA is just ensuring that without any consent or permission, that all of the information, educational, personal stuff that's in IEPs or 504s will not be released to anyone else but the parent, guardian, or other schools without consent of that parent or guardian in place of that student. Then we have the Education for All Handicapped Children's Act, and this was in 1975, and this was to support states in protecting their rights and meeting the individual needs of being able to improve the lives and educational status of people with disabilities and their families. So it doesn't matter what age, it could be infant, toddler, children, youth, adult. If they had a disability, this law and act would support them and their families. And moving forward into parental rights cases, so we have two here. The first one is Doe versus Withers, and the second one is Winkleman versus Parma City School District. And so just a brief overview of Doe versus Withers. So Jeff and Sandy Winkleman claimed that Parma City School District failed to give their disabled son Jacob a free, appropriate public education, and that is required within the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is better known as IDEA. But despite their opposition, the school district planned to place their son in a public elementary school. And after a preliminary school district hearing that affirmed his placement in that public school, Jacob's parents decided to place him in a private school at their own expense, but petitioned for federal reimbursement because of this, because he wasn't being given the same equal education that supported all of his needs because of his disabilities. And then in 1992, this was a civil jury trial that took place in West Virginia, and this, according to the Individuals with Disability Act, students with learning disabilities were guaranteed a free, appropriate public education. And so this specific case changed how schools and teachers approached an IEP, which is what most students with special needs have, which includes their accommodations, their course load, and other things like that. And that's just a brief history of the events. Under IDEA, if you have a child with a disability, you do get access to disability-specific groups under IDEA. And another point to point out is Raising Special Kids is a website that offers plenty of educational, social, and emotional resources for families with children with special needs. There's tons of different links and information on that website accessible to everyone, and I think it is a great place to start out if you do not know or want to know more about raising your child with special needs.